Hello, everyone. We're going to try something a little bit different this week. As we gather in worship, we're gathering together at two different sites, two different campuses, but we're trying out this new sermon style where I'm videoing this. Obviously, I'm not stuck in my office. I could have come out of the office, but we want to make sure that we try something a little bit new as we live into this two campus, one vision thing called Main Street Ministries. And it provides us a whole host of new opportunities. One thing that by videoing our sermons every once in a while is not only will we be able to have the same message communicated to both campuses at all of the services, Saturday and Sunday Crossroads, and then Sunday at St. Paul's, but also then on Monday we can send out the sermon either from myself or Pastor Kwame or whatever lay leader is preaching that week. And we can send that out on our devotional list or through our What's Happening or through the emails that we send out through the offices. And folks continue to tell us that they wish they had a connection point. Some folks have moved out of town, some folks have gone south, or some of you spend more time in the winter down south, or you just not able to get to church on the weekend. So this way, at least you'll be able to kind of hear that same message that everyone's hearing at Crossroads and at St. Paul's and kind of stay connected. So we hope that you will give us some grace as we try this and see how it comes out. We'll work on all the sound and all the video and all of that as we go. But hopefully every once in a while, Pastor Kwame or myself will be doing this and we'll sort of experience breaking open the Word in maybe a little bit different way than normal. So I hope you can tolerate it because, see, that's the thing. We're called to something bigger than just ourselves in one little sanctuary or two little sanctuaries. We're called to a bigger picture of following Jesus, and sometimes following Jesus requires us almost and invites us to get out of our comfort zone. To change the way that we're doing things. I mean, what would it be like if I asked all of you in the sanctuary that you're sitting in right now to move your seat and sit someplace different in the sanctuary? Some of you might actually have a heart attack and not want to do it, and you might laugh and still be uncomfortable. It's weird. It's different. Even a slight little move like that is challenging sometimes for us. We have our space, we have our routines, we have the ideas of the way we like to do things. And can you imagine what it was like for the disciples to be invited to change how they invited folks to a banquet? I mean, this had like cultural and political significance. The people that were invited were then sort of required sometimes to pay back that debt of being invited to a great place at the table. And yet now you're being invited by Jesus to invite folks who are not even part of your inner circle or group or actually will never repay you for anything. Think about that kind of change. We're called to a lot of changes in our lives, and Jesus calls us to many of those so that we can understand that, yeah, the bigger picture of following Jesus is different than maybe we're comfortable with. Recently this summer, we at the Bigner household, we had to make some changes too. I cut cable, which was a different thing for me. It saves me about $120 a month, but I have to pay this ginormous college bill, which is coming in twice a year now for our son. So we're having to make some changes. Now, does it take me out of my comfort zones? Absolutely. I like to be able to pause TV and go get some more nachos and a cold beer and then come back. But now everything's live and it's terribly awkward. Well, obviously that's not the biggest sacrifice that we're called to make in our lives, but it is a change and it takes me out of my comfort zone. And I just wonder with a little thing like that I notice and maybe are not thrilled about, what do we do in Jesus' invitation, which is very, very different. I think as a church, as Main Street Ministries at St. Paul's and at Crossroads, we are called to that same sort of banquet changing invitation that these disciples were. We have a banquet at St. Paul's. We have a banquet at Crossroads to be able to offer to people who are living right within a mile of our church. It's amazing as I spend the summer on the front lawns of both of the churches, how many people walk by the sites that we're on. And St. Paul's is the oldest church in Erie County. How many people since I think it's 1827 have walked by or come by that church? How many of them have walked into church for a week, come to a baptism, a wedding, a funeral? The same thing with Crossroads that had 3 churches that were a part of this. How many people had their lives touched and experienced God's grace? We have that banquet to be able to offer to the community absolutely right around us. Our challenge is trying to live into that something bigger and maybe change the ways that we do things so that folks that are around us will say, "Hey, there's a place for me at this table. There's a place for me at this banquet. I can experience that too. It's not just for other folks. It's actually for me." At camp at LCLC, we talked for years, and Lee Lindeman, our director down there, I think really brought this in, and this alliteration stuck with me, that our job there, whenever we're at camp, is to reach the least little lonely, lost, and left behind. All the L's. To reach out to them and make sure that we don't get caught up, just as staff there or at senior high week or the counselors, talking with just our friends or the people that we might be closest with, but we go and find that one that's sitting on their own, that one that's kind of off and looks like, I don't really feel connected to other people, that we find them and we stand with them, or we ask them how they're doing, or we invite them into our routine there at camp, or better yet, we go into their routine. How do we do at church with that? I mean, how do we do with the least and the little and the lonely and the lost and the left behind right around us? They might not look exactly like the people that were invited to this original banquet, but sometimes when you're one of those L's, those least, little, lonely, lost, and left behind, it's more about what's going on in your own lives, the people who are hurting or feeling like they've got no direction. How many times do we hear about someone that takes their own life and everyone said, they gave me no sign, I had no idea what was happening? Or somebody that we find ends up addicted to some form of drugs because they're just trying to mask all the stuff that's going on inside of them. These folks are right around us, and maybe they're in our homes or our workplaces or our neighborhoods and in our churches. I just want to make sure that at both places we start to live out this sort of banquet inviting radical welcome to all people that we are near. How many times do we see folks in the parking lot at both of our places? How many times do you come into St. Paul's to a meeting while there's a recovery group going on that maybe it's even more important that we stop and just ask that person, "Hey, how are you doing? I'm glad you're here tonight." How many times at Crossroads do folks come in on the weekend and fill that building on Saturday with some of our recovery groups? And when we're there, do we stop and ask folks, "How are you doing? I'm really glad you're here." The folks that are right around our two mission sites, a mile apart from one another. How many times, if you drive from St. Paul's to Crossroads or Crossroads to St. Paul's, do you see people just walking up and down the street? I wonder what their story is. What do they need? How can we invite them to the banquet? I'm excited for Pastor Kwame to arrive. She's going to start on Tuesday officially, and then we'll do the installations for both of us at both places. But sometimes when a new pastor arrives at a church, people often say like, "Oh, finally we get to breathe," and the pastor will kind of take over. But I have this feeling that when Pastor Kwame arrives, we're just going to start doing more stuff, and she's going to make this great invitation to us to get out of our comfort zones again. And she'll do that just by her presence with new music and worship, or new leadership, or a different way of preaching, or a style of conversation or visitation. All of those things are going to be wonderful, and they're going to invite all of us, myself included, into a different level of our comfort zone, a different way and look at following Jesus, and probably a better way than what we're doing, because we get settled into this sort of malaise sometimes of just being church and doing it the same way we used to do that. Have you ever heard that said at a church before? I bet you have. Well, this next phase of Main Street Ministries is going to be a wonderful invitation for all of you to change the way that we do things and to live into a deeper relationship with Christ. Because the reality is we were invited at some point. The reason you're here today in one of these sanctuaries is because someone, somewhere invited you to the banquet. Could have been your parents, could have been a friend. You could have wandered in because of an invitation online, or somebody told you about one of these places. Maybe it was last week, maybe this is your first week here, or maybe you've been coming to one of these places for years. But somebody made that invitation. Somebody realized that they needed to be a little bit more humble to welcome you into the same space. And what's great about that is not just to welcome you to do things like they do, but every time somebody comes into one of our sanctuaries, they change that place, and that's a good thing. It means that we need to keep changing to meet their needs and find out what they are instead of just saying, oh, you're welcome to worship like us, or you're welcome to experience Jesus exactly like I do, or the way I do, because I like it. That's not our call. That's not what Jesus says for the people to do at the banquet. He invites them to invite the folks that they've never seen before and might actually never see again. So what does that mean for us at our churches? I think one of the best places is those Saturday nights and Sunday mornings. As we get ready for worship, sometimes we kind of settle in. I see people gather around a coffee table or gather on the sofas or something and the chairs, and we just kind of sit. I want to challenge you that when you see someone who is somebody you don't recognize, or maybe it's their first time there, or maybe it's someone that's there and you just don't know their name, reach out to them. Know that it's our job to go to them and invite them, even by just sharing our name. It's so powerful for us to do. Maybe you walk outside a church and you see somebody at the library, you see somebody going to the restaurant at Runners, or you see somebody sitting in the chairs on the front lawn. Go to them and welcome them and say hello and thank them for being here and remind them somehow, some way of God's love for them. Maybe you'll be at the food truck and there'll be somebody coming up and it starts that conversation. Be ready for that. Be ready to be a welcomer, a humble welcomer, to start sharing that banquet that God's inviting us into. I think our calling in this church is great. I think it's going to be easy because our culture continues to need this grace and love and hope that we have to offer. So Main Street Ministries is going to be fantastic. I'm excited for the fall, and I'm praying for all of you so that you will hear God's call to the banquet table yourself, because we have been invited, and that's what's so powerful and awesome and amazing. But we have a banquet to invite others to as well, where we can humbly set aside the things that maybe we want or we'd like to see happen first, and we put the needs of the Amherst families and the people that are coming to worship or that we go out to, we put their needs first. And we remind them, as we were called in that Hebrews verse, to go to the prisons, the strangers, those being tortured, our marriages, the way that we use our money, all those things that were mentioned in Hebrews, that we go and use that and remind ourselves that those are places, maybe not the exact places, but places like that God has called us to be in, sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with the spiritual, physical, and emotional needs of the families right here in Amherst around us. So enjoy this weekend of rest, this extra time to celebrate, but more importantly, enjoy that call that Jesus gives to all of us, to follow the one who's already gone before us, given his life, conquered even death itself, and says to us, let me invite you to turn the tables on your banquet. Step out of your comfort zones. Be part of something bigger, a call, a love, a grace that's offered for all of us. May God bless each of you.